Welcome back to the Big Tire Garage. Now today's video, I honestly wasn't planning on doing it. I've been slowly working away on my two-wheel drive Pre Runner C10 over here, and it wasn't on my list of videos, but I had so many requests about it on social media that I thought, well, why not just throw a quick update video together, and then we'll go through a few of the next steps on this project. So if you remember the last time I worked on this, I basically did an engine rebuild. So I rebuilt that, thought it was a 5.3, ends up that the short block was a 4.8. Somebody had swapped that in there before. So I rebuilt that 4.8, did a rebuild on that. And now we're gonna work on basically getting up all the body work taken care of. So that means doing the bed, which I've actually already done, because like I said, I wasn't planning on doing a video about this, but so many people wanted to see it, I thought why not put it together. But as always, before we start any project here in the Big Tire Garage, it's time to grab a cup of coffee. Now this truck, it wasn't on my to-do list to build it, but it just sort of fell in my lap on my TV show Four Wheeler because we wanted to showcase this Dirt King Fab long travel two-wheel drive pre-runner kit. And so I went out and I bought this. I think it was a 99 or maybe a 2000 Chevy Silverado, but I didn't really want a 2000 Chevy Silverado, but a truck I've always loved is these classic C10 pickup trucks. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool to have like a really sort of badass two-wheel drive pre-runner shop truck of this classic C10 on a modern drivetrain. So that's where we're at. Last time we did the rebuild on that engine, and now I'm just working on doing a bunch of bodywork stuff. And I've already done a bunch of stuff to the bed. I have flared out the fenders on the back. I do have some wheel spacers on this axle. This is not the axle that's gonna live in this truck, but I just put those spacers on there so I could figure out what width I'm gonna build an axle at for this truck. Right now, it's basically got this cool little sort of like flared bed package going on right now out the back, you can see. And to do that, what I did is I built an inner structure. This is super lightweight. This is 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, 16 gauge steel. So there's no real additional weight right there. And everything seems to be going together pretty well. I basically added this cross member to the front of the bed. I'm gonna weld this bed structure to the front to this cross member, and then I've welded all these, added in some supports inside as well. So you can see down there, these little 1x1 supports, that's what basically supports it. And then to stitch the bedside together, I've got these little plates right here, pull the bedside together, and then on the inside of these, there's gonna be a support that goes back that holds that in place. It's designed so this center section can be pulled out without removing these two pieces, the back and the front. So you can pull this center section out, and that way you can access the shocks easily if you have to, because it's got these really, really cool Fox shocks in the back. It's got 3-tube bypasses out back. What I'm gonna do right now is work on the caps for the top of this bed, and that's basically how it's gonna be locked into place. There's gonna be a cap that essentially bolts onto the top of the bed, and it'll basically sandwich this top lip onto this 1.5 by 1.5, and that'll also mount to the backside here, and that'll basically be what pinches the top of the bed together. And then those two little pieces, I still have to put them on this side, those little braces will be what holds the bottom of the bed. I'll have to put some sort of mount at the front. I haven't decided that one yet. All right, so first things first, pull some measurements, and then we head over to our plasma table. Since I cut these plates out of some 1/8 inch P&O steel and they are so large, I decided that just to dress them up a little bit, I'm gonna run a set of dimples down the entire top of the bedside. I think it's gonna break up just basically the size of the panel, and then it will also make it look a lot better in the long run. Kind of race car-like, actually. Then what I did is I took some measurements off of the bed and I pre-drilled every single panel on the fab table. I measured in far far enough that it would be in the center of my 1.5 by 1.5 structure. So that's 3/4 of an inch on both sides. And I'm opening these up a little bit bigger than a 5/16 hole. That way, when I add the nutserts into the actual structure, there'll be a little bit of wiggle room when you install it. So these top plates basically squish the bedside in between it and the frame. So that's what keeps the top of the bedside in place. And then these little brackets that I've added down here, they not only hold our bedsides together, but what I'm gonna do inside is I'm gonna add basically a little connection in here. And so it'll be like a bed support will come off of here and go up to this side of the bed right here. And we just added some probably 3/8 round rod, and I'm gonna bend that on my new tool. What I'm gonna bend this round rod with is the TMR Customs Machete XL bender. It's a new sort of manual bender that I got in the shop. And if you're thinking of getting one, it's a great tool to have, and this is why. Once you've unboxed your Machete XL, you will see the powder-coated and black oxide finished bending handle, the degree wheel and pointer, equipped with large 5/8 dowel pins for the ultimate in bending strength. The Machete can easily bend 3/16, quarter, and 3/8 solid round bar and up to 1/4 inch thick, 2-inch wide flat plate. To assemble the bender, mount the degree wheel in a vise, drop on the bending arm, and bolt on the XL Machete handle and install the adjustable pointer. The dowels provide bending surfaces for flat and solid round bar. Now you can use the rod and flat bar bender just out of the box like I showed you to add bends to this flat plate or even solid rod. But where it really starts to shine is when you add the optional die sets that are available for that tool. There is a round bar and tube die, so this means that you can bend anything from 3/16 up to 1/2 inch tubing or round bar, and you can use this for brake lines and fuel lines. That is a game changer. Or you can use the large flat plate dies, and that just changes the radius or size of the basically curve that you're bending into the flat bar. Add these to the tool and it changes it completely. The dies are 2-inch tall, black oxide coated, and CNC machined in-house at TMR from heat-treated chromoly for a lifetime of durability. The tube dies come in 3 different radiuses. So you have a 1-inch radius, a 2-inch radius, and a 3-inch radius. And to set the tool up, what you do is you put whatever size radius you want to bend. So in this case, I'm gonna do some 3/8. So I'm gonna do a 3-inch radius. And then you just put the other dies on the other 2 pegs. One on the actual dial wheel and the other one on the bender. And then you're ready to bend. Having the ability to swap out the center tube die to different radiuses makes the bender a lot more versatile than just your handheld bender that you get from your local tube supplier. You can do different bends, different angles, anything that you need in up to 1/2 inch thick tubing. Now, one thing you do need to pay attention to when you're dealing with thin wall line or thin wall tubing, like the line that you would get from your parts store, there is going to be a maximum limit that you're going to be able to bend it before it might kink. So you want to run a few test bends through the bender before you commit to a final design. Now, the Machete bender does great at bending, but one thing that you might want to consider getting as well, especially if when you buy your line it shows up on a coil like this, is one of these tube straighteners. A tube straightener uses a series of wheels to flatten out and remove any bends in the hard line. Another way that I like to use the Machete bender in the shop is to build exhaust hanger brackets out of round rod. Now, before I just grab the round rod and start bending it up to shape, I always start with a template. And for the template, I just use inexpensive TIG rod. Bit. Bend's gonna be there. Perfect. That's all she needs. So now that our hanger matches our template, it's ready to weld onto the truck. There we go. Get your Machete XL bender or any of the TMR tools at tmrcustoms.com. I think one thing that's definitely going to sell the look of this classic C10 pickup truck is the reusing the factory tailgate. I don't think I'm actually going to make it function like a tailgate. I think it's probably just going to be a fixed panel because it sits so much higher than the bed. The proportions of the newer Chevy truck were actually pretty close to the proportions of the classic C10, but there's some subtle differences, like this tailgate sitting almost 2.5 inches above the bed sides. So to make it fit, I'm gonna have to trim the back of this frame rail off and then drop into place. But I think when it's all said and done, what I will do is just make the tailgate fixed so it doesn't move at all. The bed height was kind of set just basically because I'm reusing the inner structure of that newer bed, but the cab, I don't have any mounts on it yet, and I don't know if it's actually sitting level on the chassis, so I want to check it against the bed lines of the bed. Now, a tool that I use a lot when I'm doing this is this laser line level. Basically, I just shoot it down the body line, see what it looks like. You can hand hold it and move it around, and you can see what I'm doing here is basically lining it up on that body line on the cab just to make sure that it is the same as the bed. And then came the job that I have been dreading with this truck, and that is cleaning out the interior. I have no idea how long this thing has been sitting outside before I got my hands on it. I was just hopeful that I didn't find any snake skins in it, because if that was the case, I would have to burn down the shop and build a new one, because I do not like snakes. With the interior completely cleaned out, it is pretty obvious that the floor in this truck, it's shot. It's absolutely hammered. The structure underneath it that make up the cab mounts, there's one right here and there's one back here at the back. They're actually not too bad, but the floor pan is rotten. Now, there's a couple things that I could do here. I could patch the floor. I could put a whole new floor in the truck. There's companies like AMD that make repop floor panels for this truck. But then the problem is, where do you stop? Because if I'm gonna put a new floor in, I'm probably gonna need to put new inner rockers on both sides and then probably outer rockers on both sides. And the truck, it's pretty ratty. It's got like a cool sort of rat patina look to it that I kind of like, and I want to keep that. So I don't want to have a bunch of new sheet metal mixed in with old sheet metal, especially on the outside of the cab, like when it comes to the rockers. Now, the cab structure I don't need to worry about because the cab and the cage are eventually going to be all welded and or bolted together into the chassis of the truck. So the cab will be designed to never come off this truck. If you were to strip this truck down to a bare chassis, the cab and the frame would stay together, the bed would come off, and the front sheet metal would come off. So that means that I need to deal with this floor because I don't want a whole bunch of holes in the floor, especially when you're ripping around the dirt, because it means there's just going to be dirt and basically dust flying in through the bottom of the truck. So this is my plan. I'm going to go ahead and leave it alone for now, but my plan eventually will be to cut the rotten floor out and make a channel right by the rocker here. And I'll connect this front cab mount to this back cab mount with a piece of 1.5 by 1.5 16 gauge, the same material that I used for the top of my bed sides. Then I'll cut out the majority of the floor and I'll just build a whole new sheet metal floor for the inside of this truck. It'll all be made out of 18 gauge. I'll put a bunch of beads in it to make it look super cool and kind of race car. I'll build a hump to get up over the transmission. But essentially, the bottom half of the inside of this truck will be all brand new sheet metal. And then I'll tie that 1.5 by 1.5 16 gauge into the frame that then gets welded on to the chassis. It's kind of the best of both worlds for this particular application because I'm going to get to keep the ratty look on the outside. Inside, the floor will be still good and strong, but like I said, the cage is going to be what ties this whole thing together because the cab and the frame are going to become one piece, kind of like a unibody. Right now, what I want to do though is make sure the cab doesn't move. So I'm going to build some mounts for the cab that basically remove the rubber isolators. So they're just going to basically bolt up to the cab mounts. And for that, I'm going to have to head over to my favorite tool, the plasma table. This is the factory mount for the C10, which actually isn't too bad. Normally there'd be an isolator in here. My plan is to essentially solid mount this cab because the cage is going to come through the floor here, tie into the frame here. So I just need something to basically locate the cab for now. And then when I'm all said and done, the cab will essentially be part of the frame and won't be removable like the bed. So I think what I'll do is just build off this frame rail. There's the same bolt on the opposite side. We'll just build a little bracket with a little kick down that holds out. We'll draw it up on the plasma table, cut it out, weld it on. With the front mount done, I'm very happy with how this cab is not going to move now. Now I can turn my attention to the front sheet metal. Now the front sheet metal on this truck, just like the bed, is pretty ratty, but that's what I like. I like how it looks. And I'm really only going to be using a few things. I'm going to be using the hood, the fenders, and the grille. All of the inner structures going to have to go away. The problem is all of this is essentially seized together and rusted together. So I'm going to have to kind of go at this surgically with the cutting torch and probably maybe even the plasma cutter and the grinder and the Sawzall to try to get all this stuff apart. My goal in the end will be to have the fenders mounted, the hood mounted, and maybe the grille even mounted all in one piece, and then possibly come up with some sort of like tilt front end where the entire front end comes forward instead of having a functioning hood that kind of tilts up and down like that. Because I'm gonna probably have to cut that fender well opening all the way up into the hood depending on how much suspension compression I have. I'm pretty sure the tire is gonna get into that hood. So that new wheel opening molding is gonna be carved all the way up, probably to that upper sort of body line in the hood right now. So to have a separate fender and a separate hood, it's kind of not gonna work. So I think the plan right now is going to be to just start disassembling this sheet metal, and then once it's broken free and figured out, I'll set the truck at full compression, and then we can start taking some measurements. I've been moving this basically front clip around the shop for a while, not knowing how it was actually seized together, and I still couldn't wrap my head around what was basically holding the hood in place. One thing that still shocks me about these vehicles that I find down here in the South is that even when you find them this rusty, the fasteners will still unbolt. I don't know what it is, even though I've got this sheet metal and it's literally got holes in it from rust. If you can get a wrench or a socket onto the head of a bolt, 9 times out of 10, it just backs out once you break that initial rust hold free. I don't know what it is about how things basically are basically rotting down here in the South versus up in Canada. But after getting the hood hinges off, the hood was still like stuck in the middle, and I was just baffled as to what it was until I finally remembered that the way these hoods work is there's like a little pin in the middle of the hood, and it goes through a little spring pocket. So once I got in there with the torch and just cut the nut off the back of that little pin, the hood literally just fell away from the fenders, which shocked me, but I was very happy that that's all it was and that it wasn't, you know, sheet metal rusted to sheet metal. So at this point, I now have the hood separated from that inner cowl section, but all I want is the skin of the fenders. And like I said before, I just went at it with my 90-degree impact tool, my Ingersoll Rand cordless one that I have, a couple of wrenches, and I was literally able to unbolt the inner fenders on this, what is this now, 70-year-old truck, and that just blows my mind. So right now I have both front fenders essentially kind of mocked up, not really mocked up. I literally just put one of the mounting bolts in. You can see this, obviously the tire is pushing up on the fender. I knew I was going to have to clearance it. I knew that was going to be an issue. This bolt hole should line up with this bolt, which it does not, which is fine. What has to happen is this fender's got to get trimmed. The problem I have is if realistically most of that fender is actually going to go away in the center, I'm going to end up with a little chunk at the back, little chunk at the front, and then the hood. The problem is if I cut that fender in half right now, then locating the front grill shell is going to be a little bit tricky. So I think what I'm actually going to do is I'll actually put the front grill shell into place. I'm going to raise the truck up on the lift, allow these fenders to drop down, put the front grill shell into place, take the actual tires off, I'll measure the size of them, and then I'll mark the fender and everything without the tire in place. That way I know that all the body lines are right, everything is correct, because that fender is essentially just going to get cut, like I said, into 2 different pieces. So I'm going to lift it up till the fender is sitting correctly, put the front grill shell in, figure out the mounts for it. It's going to be solid mounted just like the cab. And I may even figure out where the hood's going to go. I'm hoping, in all honesty, I'm hoping that when the turbos and everything go on here, kind of hoping they might even stick out of the hood. I don't think they will, though. I think there's enough room there. They won't, but I'd really like it if they did. But anyway, so that's the plan right now. So lift it up, mock up a grill shell, and then just continue from there. Once I got the basically front sheet metal all figured out where it was going to land, I was actually shocked as to how much longer the front of the newer Silverado was compared to the classic C10. All the other proportions were kind of scary similar. You know, the bed was essentially the same length. It was the same width. The cab lined up with everything, even though I'm reusing that newer internal bed structure. Everything just sort of seemed to fit, but the front sheet metal, this is where obviously a lot of changes we've seen in these modern trucks versus these classic trucks, because I had to cut off almost 18 inches of frame rail just for this grill shell to fit. Now that's going to change a lot of things later on that I had planned with this build, but they're going to be happy accidents. You'll find out about those a little bit later. Basically all I'm doing here is setting up the grill on a couple of my pipe stands. And then I just bolted it together with a couple of bolts just to hold it. The pipe stands are going to hold it just temporarily because there's a lot of play in the bolts at the back of the cab, so the front end can drop and rise almost 3 inches when you put it into place. So once again, I broke out the laser level and shot the top of the fender to make sure it was lining up with the body line on the bedside. I just want to make sure everything is looking right before I lock in that front grille. These are just a couple little 90-degree brackets that I've whipped up on my fast cut plasma table. Bent them in this tool right here. This is my Titan 25T. This is a CNC press brake. This has been a game changer. Probably one of my favorite tools I bought in the past little while, because being able to have repeatable bends over and over and over again is just so nice to have in the shop. It's a full CNC, basically sheet metal brake bender, but I don't really use the CNC capabilities as much as I could, but I do like being able to basically have repeatable bends over and over. And then it's just a matter of locking it into place and making sure it looks good, and then we go from there. I'm trimming a lot of this fender away, essentially right up to this upper lip. And even though it looks like the tire is still going to fit, I think I'm actually going to still cut into the hood later on, because I think there's a good chance that at full compression and when you're basically landing this truck from a jump, there's a chance that that front tire could still get up into this fender. But I won't do that until this fender is mounted into the cage that I'm going to build underneath the hood of the truck. That way you don't have to worry about it moving around. It looks like I'm going to be able to still use just normal hood hinges on this truck, which is awesome. And I'm just going to basically have the front sheet metal set in place and the hood will open and close like normal. But I want to make sure that there's plenty of room for these tires, because the last thing I want is for this thing to basically land and have that tire just tear into this classic sheet metal that I've spent so much time trying to save. Okay, so I'm glad I didn't cut this fender up because actually I mean, it's close. That's pretty much the end of the up travel. There's a little bit of bump stop left based on the bypass. So there's a little bit of, there's a little rubber bump into the bottom of this bypass down in here, but we're right here. You can kind of see the little rubber bump right here on this bypass, but it's basically bottomed out on this, and that leaves us with just a little bit of travel here. I mean, I guess I could probably plan for a little bit more, but that means that that rubber bump is gonna have to either be removed or plan for it to compress. But honestly, I think that's plenty of up travel for a 37 on this truck. The issue that I have right now is this right here. And this happens when you start trimming these fenders. I mean, there's lots of room back here. Well, I say lots of room, but it's even gonna get tight when it turns. It might end up hitting right here. And then up here, it's already hitting on the inner structure inside there. So I'm gonna have to trim that. And I'm probably gonna have to open this up just a little bit further, probably take another inch off of that. Just basically come right by here, because when that tire turns, you don't want this tire getting into this. And then, as I said before, the bump can is gonna basically land right on the top of this upper arm. So I'll build the bump can right here, and that'll basically be where it stops. So it's looking really good. I'm still gonna be able to do some nice bead rolled inner fenders in here, basically come across and go down to basically hide all the suspension. If I do that, I don't know. I don't know if I'm actually gonna hide the suspension on this truck, or I mean, I think it'd be kind of cool if you opened the hood and saw all the shocks in there. It'd be pretty rad. The turbos, they have to change because this front end is a little bit shorter, obviously, than the old C10. That's why I chopped the half of my foot off the frame at the front where the radiator support would go. So the problem that I have here is originally I just had a little up sweep piece right here and the turbo mounted here. That's gonna be all up in the way of this hood section right now. So my plan right now is to throw a 180 on this, then put the turbo basically 90-degree up on that and the turbo on top of that. I think it will solve the problem of getting the turbos where I want them. I'll actually be able to clock the turbo for a height that I like. And most importantly, now the turbos will be outside of the hood. So it's a happy accident. I want the turbos sticking out of the hood of this truck. I think it will just make it look so cool if there's two turbos on either side sticking out of the hood. So I do have a little bit more fab work to do on that end, but that's okay. That's what I want. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and do another little carve on the front fender here, just to open this up on both sides. I'm gonna carve up on the inner structure in there. The good news is I can do that with the tire on, because guess what? At droop, look at all the space I have. There's tons of space to get in here and do some work. The mounts for the front grill shell, those are just temporary. I'm probably gonna work up a mount that integrates into the cage. The cage is gonna come off of that front frame rail, go up and go back into the firewall here. That will be what holds the bump can. And then I'll probably just build a bracket off of it that probably bolts into this front section here. I want to basically grab this front grill shell in a couple spots of the cage, because like I said before, it'll bolt on, so then technically the front end will be removable, whereas as I said before, the cab is going to just be basically welded to the chassis. But the goal today was to finish up the front sheet metal. So I'm going to go ahead, do a little bit more trimming on this front end, and then then I'm going to put the springs on, because I have the springs for these shocks. So I'll pull the front shocks out, put the springs on, and then I'll just go ahead, then it's done. I didn't want to put the springs on until I knew there was clearance for these tires. So now that I know that's done, now I can go ahead, like I said, a little bit more trimming, just a little extra room for those tires at full stuff. And then we can go ahead, put these springs on the shocks, set this thing down on the ground, set the hood on it. We're gonna look at, maybe even set the doors on it. I don't know, maybe just gonna look at what this thing looks like now that it's all done. That was the whole goal today. Get this entire, all the sheet metal fab done on the 60 C10 Pre Runner. The springs for this front suspension were actually spec'd by Dirt King Fab. So it's an 18-inch long 700 mainspring and then a 4-inch 500-pound tender spring. Now, I think that's going to get me pretty close. I don't know what the weight difference is going to be when this truck is all finished compared to a 99 to 01 Silverado versus the sheet metal that I have on the front of this truck. But I think it'll be close enough to get the truck on the ground and maybe even get it out for its first round of shock tuning when it's all said and done. But there's still a bunch of weight to add to the front of this truck with, the tubing for the roll cage, as well as a brace for the top of this shock tower that I need to build, because the brace that was on it I had to cut off, because you can see the leftover parts of it there. They didn't fit with those up forward headers for the turbos. But either way, this is a great spring package to start with. It'll get the truck on the ground and we can see what it looks like. This is where we're going to stop today on this classic C10 Pre Runner. Thank you so much for joining us here inside the Big Tire Garage. Now, the next time I work on this truck, I'm going to be dealing with the hot side and the cold side of the turbo placement, as well as engine cooling. And the reason that I had to wait to do that is because that front sheet metal is really going to determine where all those items are going to go. Originally, where I thought the turbos were going to go, they're not going to go there at all. But the good news is they are going to stick out of the hood. But for today's job, bedside's done, cab mounted to the frame, front sheet metal on. This truck is now sitting at ride height. It's got the right springs in it. This thing looks just flat out mean.